Hello, and welcome to the Why Not Today podcast, where we celebrate courage, determination, and the power of saying, Why not today? I'm your host, Leslie Kane, and in each episode, we dive into inspiring stories of individuals who have taken hold or taken bold steps, faced their fears, and embraced the possibility of today. From entrepreneurs to artists to dreamers to doers, we explore the moments when they said, Enough waiting, why not today? Join us as we uncover the heartwarming, the audacious, and the transformative. Whether it's pursuing a lifelong passion, overcoming obstacles, or simply choosing joy, our guests share their journeys and inspire us all. I started this podcast in honor of my father, Patrick Kane, who often said, Why not today? And remember, you're just one decision away from changing your life. And I've got a repeat guest on here today, Miss Laura Carney, who I have maybe a year ago or so you were on. And Laura, and I always talk about how we connected, but I'm going to share the story again. Laura is an author and wrote the book My Father's List. And I was in Asheville, Virginia, and I kind of feel like, and I've said this often, when I remember exactly where I was, what I was doing, and I connect with somebody, they're going to be in my life forever. So I remember sitting on the couch. We were in an Airbnb watching CBS Sunday Morning, which I just told Laura I've never watched ever. I've watched it a couple times, but it's not something I regularly do. And she was on. It happened to be Father's Day, and she was talking about her dad's book. And so one of the things my dad always said is ask. The worst thing somebody can say is no. So I started following Laura and then asked her if she'd be on the podcast. And she was like, of course. And so you're on the podcast last year, and then I host a luncheon. She came as a speaker, and we've connected in lots of different things. And I consider you a great friend now. And I just love all the connections we've come through and our dads. And there's just so many connections. It's crazy. This friendship is not by accident. So Laura's been did something kind of fun a couple months ago. Fun to watch, not probably fun to experience. Your phone detox. So I thought
Oh,
have you on to share your courage story around that and lessons learned and just continue our conversation. So, Laura, why don't you introduce yourself, kind of a quick bio, a fun fact, and then we will talk about your courage journey and we'll talk about your detox on your phone or whatever else you want
sure.
to share.
Um, well, I guess I want to start by saying I'm also like a proud user of those Mary Kay amazing eye patches and creams you told me about. So I feel
Yay.
like I'm ready to do interviews like in a new way now.
Oh,
Like I
good.
feel my skin feels a lot brighter. I
See?
want to give a shout out to that
Yay.
because you are expert at that work. And it's funny I remember you contacted me when you saw I was posting about the phone cleanse, and I think what you used was the word courage. You said, "Oh, you have a lot of courage to be doing that." So I guess before I sort of explain what it is, can you tell me what you meant when you said that? Because I still don't totally know.
Well, let's talk about that in a minute. First, just who's Laura?
Oh, who am I?
Quick
Sorry, but
bio.
you said you saw me on CBS Sunday Morning. My book is called My Father's List. And I don't know if this is going to be on video or not, but
Yeah, it is on
it
video too.
is. You can see it
And
there.
by the way, I didn't share this with you. I don't know if I sent it to you the other day, but a friend of mine was on a sailboat in California and sent me a picture of her on the boat reading your book.
What? Will you send that to me?
Yes. So she's like reading the book, sitting. I'm like, Brat, you're in California on a boat.
I hope she got up to chapter 11 and go sailing by myself.
I don't think she was sailing by herself, but she has finished it because she shared her Goodreads app with me. And just, I got a
Aw,
notice today that she finished reading it.
that's so nice.
But yeah, I'll send that to you. So yeah,
Yeah, my book is about my father died when he was 54 and I was 25 years old, and the year was 2003. It was the summer. He died because of a teenager who was lost, and she stopped at a red light to make a phone call to ask for help. And then because she was on the phone, she just drove through the next red light, and that's the red light where my dad was turning left.
Mhm.
And I've been told that he died instantly, probably. It's still not the easiest thing for me to talk about, although I've become really used to talking about it now. And when it happened, it was a thing I never talked about because learned really quickly as a 25-year-old, this was a very scary thing for other people in their 20s to hear
Mhm.
about, especially I was a young person who had just moved to New York to follow my dreams and to become a journalist. And I remember I even went on an interview once at the Wall Street Journal and talked about it. And they just felt really bad for me. But it's like,
you don't tell the story for people to get the sympathy,
I
you
didn't
know?
do it for that reason
Right.
though. It was just they're like, how's your life going in New York? They wanted to get to know me as a
Right.
person. Similar to you just said, tell the listeners or viewers what your story is. And that truly is what was happening.
Right.
And I didn't know any way around it at the time. And I was still so green. I was only 25 years old. I didn't know not to talk about it. Um, yeah, so that was a time in my life where it was like I was supposed to be very optimistic and very almost like this feeling of invincibility that young people have in a new city like that.
Mhm.
And instead, I was scared to death, like just scared of basic mortality,
Yeah.
just thinking like, oh my God, that this is what life is. Like your father could just die in an instant like this. And
Yep.
there were spiritual things going on for me even then that felt like almost I was being given signs and I was being prepared in a way. But I think I was so young that I couldn't give them a lot of credence. Like seeing a white butterfly the day of his funeral, meeting a man on the subway who I thought was an angel minutes before I found out he had died.
Oh, wow.
Um, just the last time I ever saw him, and he gave me this big bear hug, feeling like that was it. I had
Yeah.
this genuine feeling like our relationship here had come to some kind of a close.
Well, it's interesting you say that because we've talked about things with our dads
Yeah.
and connections. And I remember distinctly, and it wasn't when my dad passed away, but he had a stroke and he was getting ready to go to a wedding. And weren't, but I think we're more now, a big huggy kind of family. And I
Hmm.
remember where I was standing, he like gave me a big hug. And then he went to this wedding and had a major stroke, and we didn't think he was going to make it.
I'm
But I
sorry.
distinctly remember that. Now he did
Yeah,
live
it's like
13 more years, but
a light
uh,
bulb moment kind of
yeah.
thing.
So like
Yeah.
even the other day, I was getting ready to go out of town. My mom was always like, "Give me a hug," but I didn't give her a hug before I left, and I almost went to her house the next day just because I still remember that. Like
Yeah.
hug people and tell them you love them because you
And
just
my dad
never
was a
know.
great hugger too. Like
Yeah.
people, I even had a conversation with a cousin about this recently because he hugs the same way. And
Aw.
he's like, it must be a carny thing. My
Aw.
brother hugs like that too.
Mhm.
Um,
All right, so
so
squirrel. We're
anyway,
gonna have lots
long
of
story,
squirrels in this
what's
conversation.
that?
I said squirrel. We're gonna have lots of squirrels in
Oh
this
yeah, we
conversation.
are. So long story short, I decided the best way to honor my father was to continue honoring myself and my dreams and to stay in New York. I did have lots of times that year where I just was there for an internship, like an unpaid magazine internship. I didn't have any commitment to a job. As I said, I wasn't getting those jobs. So I wanted to go home, but it helped a lot actually that my future husband had moved across the country to be with me. Like we had just met. He met my dad 5 days before he died. And he
Wow.
believed in me and he was saying, you have to stay here. Like you have to keep pursuing this. So that's what I did. I stayed in New York. It took me 8 years, but then I got the job of my dreams. That's when I started working at Good Housekeeping. That was always my goal, a national magazine. I kind of climbed my way up the ladder. And then one day when I was at Good Housekeeping, an article came across my desk about a man whose daughter had died because of a driver who was distracted. He was reaching for his phone and an iced tea at the same time. And she was a journalism student at Fordham in New York, named
Wow.
Casey Feldman, 21 years old, was walking across crossing walk to her job, her summer job at Ocean City, New Jersey as a waitress. And when I read this story, it was like something happened, like a red flag, or not a red, like an alarm went off in my head. And it was just like, oh, that driver who killed my dad was distracted. They said she was cited $200 for talking on a cell phone, and back then we didn't have smartphones. We just had
No.
like the phone and texting, and that was it.
Right.
So that was about, I think, 2013. So now we're coming on the 10-year anniversary of my dad's death, and I finally figured this out, like
Which
what it was.
2013 was the year my dad passed away.
Yeah, of course. But that's when it was 10 years. And I think there's something about those decade anniversaries
Yeah.
or their 5-year anniversaries, right? It makes you sort of stop and take stock of things. So I
Mhm.
definitely was doing that and thinking, okay, I did it. I made it. I made it to this job of my dreams. It was not an easy road to get here, But here I am. I was actually starting to write a little bit more. That was something I had struggled with very much since my dad's death, because my goal was to be a journalist in New York so I could write for magazines. It wasn't so I could copy edit for them.
Right.
And yet those were the jobs I was getting. I was correcting other people's writing. And a lot of it was because my inspiration was gone. Or so I thought. Like I just couldn't land a pitch. I wasn't having the same kinds of ideas that I had in college. I got a honorable mention for an award when I was in college because the idea was so good for a story. So like I was known to have that, and suddenly I
Right.
didn't. And finally, when I became an advocate after I called the man in that story at Good Housekeeping and said, I think I have some experience with this. How can I help? Probably the bravest call I've ever made in my life. He's like, my daughter was a writer and she believed everybody has a story. And I think you need to write about this.
Wow.
I was scared to death to write about my dad, to write about what happened. But Joel sort of stepped in. He became a mentor to me. And the first thing I wrote was for his website. And then a few years later in 2019, well, I should mention 3 years later, I got married, 2016. And then that was the year that I found my dad's bucket list. And then in that year, when I found the bucket list, I had now become an advocate for safe driving. I was feeling like there has to be something more I can do. Besides, I would run marathons and raise money. I would go to high schools and talk. And I thought there has to be something else. I was even like at a national conference learning how we could teach about this. In my heart, I had forgiven the girl who killed my dad. Once I understood how, like, just what a cognitive load it is to actually use your phone while driving at the same time.
Yeah.
But I wanted to help other people understand about it and believe that it's real, because at this point it was becoming so much part of our culture that people were doing this. And I thought as soon as we saw my dad's bucket list at my brother's new apartment, this is the way to do it. I can finish this bucket list for my dad. There are 54 items on it. I can honor him, honor his legacy, honor that he had dreams. And maybe the story itself will be so interesting that people will be attracted to the story, but they'll come away with the message of, oh, real people really die this way.
Yeah.
That was my concept. But in 2019, when I was in the middle of doing this list, it's like I didn't have enough going on anyway, right? That's when I came up with the idea for the smartphone cleanse. Because by then I was beginning to understand it's not a matter of people don't know. Like people know that if you use your phone while walking down the street, you could fall into a pothole. You know what I mean?
Right. And we don't pay attention. And I love what a lot of times you see now. And there's one area when I pull out of my condo that people just stop because they're lost, because people get lost and they like stop their car in the middle of the road and they're
Yep.
looking at their phone. And you
Yeah.
have inspired me because, I know you will not talk on a cell phone, and
No, not while
even if
driving.
like, and I do have a Bluetooth, and I am guilty of having conversations in a car, but I always think about you, and
Thank you.
I'll stop myself from doing stupid things that I've thought about doing. But
Yeah, because you just don't know the variables.
no,
And one thing I have found really interesting is oftentimes it's on the street where you live where these things happen.
yeah, and
Because
we're
there's a
driving
tendency to,
these
sorry, go ahead.
multiple ton vehicles that in a
Right.
flash, in a second. And I know somebody that she's in the Christian ministry world, and she wrote a book that she was driving down a back road and looked, not even on a phone, but looked down for a second, looked up and
Yeah.
hit somebody on a bike and killed him. And
Yeah.
her life was forever changed, obviously.
Yeah, and I just, I wasn't prepared to accept this notion that like, oh, if it's your time, it's your time. Like I feel like people say things like that and it's just like, well, that's not cool. Like my
Yeah,
dad's life mattered more than that. And
right.
while I'm at a point now where I do fully accept that this was part of his story and he was supposed to die this way, um, I also believe that as his daughter, it's part of my story to share who he was and to raise awareness of the way that he died. And because when it happened, and then I still pursued that journalism career, and then I got into the advocacy, what I kept thinking was there must be some reason I'm the only journalist in the room. Why am I here?
Right.
They're telling us, here's how you tell your story. And I'm thinking, I've already gotten a degree in telling stories.
Right.
Like I could be teaching them, like, what is this? So that was a big part of it. And when I took that crazy leap to check off all 54 remaining items on my dad's bucket list, which, as Leslie mentioned, when my book came out, My Father's List, I got lots of press and I got to go on CBS Sunday Morning. That's where she found me. Um, one of the things that happened a lot to me was, I mean, that was a day-to-day experience. And I mean, that's part of why I was so attracted to Why Not Today, because it really was this new way of living for me of I'm going to cherish every day of my life and use it to live out these dreams. And I had a lot of days where I'd wake up and think, I don't know if I'm brave enough to go skydiving. I have to put a lot more work in to learn about horses. I'm going to go to Santa Fe and ride a horse fast, or you're learning about surfing, or even like the scariest part, which was writing the book and finding an agent and learning about the book publishing process, something I had no concept of, except that my husband is a book designer, so that helped me a little bit.
Right.
Pushing myself to do things I truly did not believe I could do. What it really required a lot of the time was thinking about those families,
Yeah.
thinking about Casey Feldman, all of my friends I had made who Russell Hurd, JC Good, just, there's so many of them who had lost a loved one or even been in the crash themselves. And it kept me going because I thought they need a voice.
Well,
And I think that's one thing that's missing sometimes when people talk about following your passion. It's like,
right.
why are you doing it?
Yeah, we need to know the why and to
Yeah.
have that motivating. And I was talking to somebody earlier today and she was a little overwhelmed and frustrated. She's like, I don't know if I should keep going. And she's like, everything you read and hear is like, don't give up. It's about to happen. But I'm like, if you don't have the why, you don't have the passion behind it, you're just doing it to check it off. Maybe you need to evaluate, is that really something I need to be doing? But to have that bigger why, and
Yeah.
have that bigger why that's beyond us. Like I always say, you never know who's watching and who's paying attention, and things that you're doing that people notice, and you're making a difference in their life, and we have no idea who those people are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm happy you brought that up though, because one of the weird things that happened to me was when I got my first agent, he told me I needed to go private online. He's like, hide your social media, hide Facebook, hide Instagram. If you're going to do a blog post, make it really short, like, he's like, I don't want people, if we're going to sell this as a book, I don't want people to find you and think they can just get it for free online. So that's what I did. But it was like, I did that in 2017 and it was like right at the height of influencing. So I would
Right.
see influencers and be very jealous of them and just see their audiences multiplying. And
Right.
meanwhile, mine is stuck at like 200 or something.
Well,
But the interesting thing though, I want to add is that that was one of the best pieces of advice I could have been given.
oh, really?
Even though I have told other people and other agents about it, and other editors about it, and they're like, that's crazy. Why did they tell you that? That's so old school. Now I'm really happy I did it because I do think part of our fixation on phones has to do with that. Like I think once social media was introduced, it became a new level of FOMO.
Yeah. So let's talk about this phone detox and why I called it courageous. And it's courageous of you to, I mean, that is so much of a part of our life, and it takes a lot of energy not to pick up your phone. And so your detox was you could use it for phone calls, but that was it. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah,
Yeah. And and I will admit, first to admit, I am so addicted to my phone. And the more tired, stressed, overwhelmed I am, the more I grab it. Like as busy as, and it's just habit. Like I'm trying to be better. So I was like, okay, I can only check email once an hour. And I'm like, that's silly. No, I am not that important. Nobody needs me. But it's that adrenaline, it's the dopamine, it's all the cortisol, all the things that happen, all the studies that it's just habit. Like I can tell you, I'm going to pick up my phone and I'll hit this and I'll hit that and I'll hit that. You want to check it all. And
right.
um, so it's hard. And
Yeah, well, yeah,
it
sorry, go
takes
ahead.
it takes a lot of discipline and courage to say, I'm going to do this. And I think you had a bigger reason
Yeah.
instead of just, okay, I'm trying to create better habits and a waste of my time. And
Yeah, my why, as we were saying,
yeah,
my
so
why.
talk about, so you do it, there's a specific date you do it. You
You know
do
what?
it
I
every
just
year.
remembered the reason, the reason I chose that date.
Okay.
So the specific date of the very first time I ever did it was 2019, July 17th of 2019.
Okay.
And the reason I chose that date is because that was the day Casey Feldman was killed.
Okay.
And I thought that's a weird coincidence that she was killed by, as I mentioned, that person driving a tractor trailer. She was killed, or a truck. I think it was a tractor trailer actually, which is a little bit scarier. She was killed 3 weeks before my dad was killed. Not the same year. For her, it
Right.
was 2009. But so that's why it was the 10-year, like we were just talking about 10-year anniversaries. It was the 10-year anniversary of Casey's death. And I thought, I want to do something for her family, to honor her.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I can honor my dad at the same time because it was 3 weeks later. And also, they had the same birthday,
Wow. Which,
April 6th.
okay.
I always thought that was odd. She was exactly 39 years
Wow.
younger than him. And my dad, growing up, always made a joke whenever anybody asked him how old he was turning for his birthday, he would say he was turning 39.
Hmm.
It was like one of his favorite dad jokes.
Wow.
Even though he lived to be 54, but for
Right.
probably almost 20 years there, he was 39 every year. So I thought that's, you have to look for the signs like that.
Yeah,
I thought that's not a
absolutely.
coincidence. I'm supposed to do
No.
like maybe, just maybe, because at this point I'm 3 years into my project. I mean, in the third year of it, realizing my dad's spirit is helping me check off this bucket list. Like now I have become totally different in my faith, my spirituality. And I thought maybe, just maybe, Casey is helping me too.
So your detox is from the day that the anniversary of
Casey died.
Casey's death
Yeah.
to the
July
anniversary of
17th.
your
Yeah.
dad's.
Yep. 22 days.
Okay. So
So, they say that thing about like it takes, I think, isn't it 2 weeks?
21 days.
Or yeah, 21 days to change a habit. So, uh, the other thing I wanted to say though about my why is that when I decided to do this in 2019, I was sort of looking at the progress of the activism. Are people still using their phones? This has been they've been, I mean, Oprah was dealing with this in 2009. Like it's been a while now that people have
Right.
had that education out there. And what I realized, or at least surmised from my own observations, is that people know, as I was just saying, people know you might fall into a pothole if you're walking while using your phone. And people know there's enough education and stories out there that someone knows the possible results. I mean, I think
Right.
the official number is like 25%. Like if you do make a phone call or talk on the phone, whatever it might be while driving, you're 25% more likely to get into a crash. Like that number is too high for me.
Yeah.
Like I do have a personal attachment to it, but I'm also a journalist, so I think very analytically. And when I heard that number, it was like, no, I'm not taking that.
Well,
That
and luckily the world has turned around with the drinking and driving more.
Yes, and I have
Um,
met the woman who started that, Candace
which
Lightner.
yeah, so I mean, when I was younger and in college, I won't even tell you the stupid things we did. But
Right,
and
right.
the kids these days are they won't even think about it.
Well, and this will be the same way
Yeah,
someday. That's how I look at
100%.
it. Like you watch, if you watch Mad Men, for example, you're like, oh my God, everybody was smoking. How did they not
We were
know?
just talking about that the other day. Everybody was smoking in airplanes, and they had a non-smoking section in an airplane, like 3 rows that you could smoke. And
Yeah.
did that make a difference? So, all right, so we can
So
talk
that's
forever.
all. Yeah, that's all I mean. I realize this is not an education issue anymore. It's a cultural issue.
Oh, absolutely. So I know I was following some of your posts, and that's what intrigued me. And you said it was harder this year and
Yeah.
lessons learned. So you just use your phone for your phone calls.
Yeah.
Um, so like if you're sitting at dinner with somebody and somebody has a question about something like, when did this start? You don't pick up your phone and Google it,
No.
which I think we're missing problem solving, and we're missing learning, and we're missing having conversations about things
Yeah.
because you automatically just go find an answer.
Well, I immediately got ideas for my next book.
Okay.
For essays I wanted to write, for things I wanted to do. I had been in a bit of a slump since the book tour. Because, I mean, think about it. Like, I had 6 years where I'm doing 54 items from my dad's bucket list. And then I immediately went into selling the book
Right.
and
And then what?
traveled all over the country. And it's like, then what? Like, no
Well,
one
they
thought I
talk
could
about
do
like
this.
Olympic athletes and stuff after they reach they get their gold or they go to the Olympics and then they're depressed.
Yep, I felt like an athlete. It was very much that.
Yeah.
And there was a come down because the excitement over it was so much bigger than any of us expected. And I shouldn't say nobody thought I could do this. People who love me and believe in me, I'm sure my mom would tell you that she knew I could do it. My husband would say that. I don't mean
But
it
to
that
see the book
way.
in bookstores and to the level
Yeah,
and to be on
there's
national
something
news.
I was thrust into it in a
Right.
way, and it was a little overwhelming for me. And then when it was starting to dissipate as it naturally does, I was like, what do I do now? So yeah, starting that phone cleanse, it was like a reboot for my brain
Okay. So you have
because
less
I'm not
new
distracted.
ideas for
New
books.
ideas. One of
What
the
else did
things
you
that
learn?
happens, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, what else did you learn about you?
Yeah, well, one of the things that happens every time, I mean, I've done it 5 times now every year. So one of the things that happens every time is in about day 3, I'm suddenly really emotional.
Hmm.
Like I could cry at the drop. I mean, I'm already someone who wears my heart on her sleeve, but it's like you feel this release of anxiety or stress crying that just happens all of a sudden. And you're like, where is this coming from? And what I think it is that there's a dopamine rush when we look at our phones.
Absolutely.
And like you were saying before, if you're stressed or worried, like you'll just pick it up. And
Hmm.
it's the distraction and it's like, oh, look at my little number of likes or my number of emails that I got. And it's designed to be that way. The
Oh yeah.
dopamine hit is supposed to make it addictive. But one of the unfortunate side effects of that is it sort of blunts your emotions.
Yeah.
So my all of my natural emotions start coming back. And it's overwhelming at first because it's like,
Yeah.
what is happening? What is this? And it's like, oh, I don't have this, you know, I'm not a drinker, I don't have like very many vices, but that is a vice if it's something that's numbing your emotions.
Oh yeah. It is totally a vice.
Yeah, so that happens. And yeah, the reason I said it was harder this time, you would think I would have said that because I did it during the book tour too. And
Wow.
that's part of why I got so backlogged. Like I'm on like, I don't know, bookstore 15 on Instagram, still recapping it a year later.
Hmm.
I finished the book tour in October of last year and I'm still recapping it. And
Yeah.
that happened partly because I was doing my 3-week cleanse in the middle of the book tour.
Right.
No, that wasn't really it. That was sort of fine because I was on the road and I was busy and I was talking to people. So I would say the phone cleanse last year during that book tour was easier. It wasn't great for my promotions,
Right.
but I'm like, I can't just not do it because I'm on a book tour. That's crazy. Like they died no matter what. So this year was harder, A, because like I said, I was going through that bit of a slump. So I felt a little bit more isolated by it. And B, because people don't make phone calls anymore. You
They
know,
don't.
they have to email you first or text you first and say, are you free for a
Does it
call?
drive you crazy that it takes days to schedule a phone call
It's so inefficient.
that takes 5 minutes to hold?
Like, are we all the queen and king of England all of a sudden? Like,
I know it's so
why can we
ridiculous.
not be
Well,
interrupted?
I've started calling some of my Mary Kay customers and saying, I'm trying something new that's old. I'm calling people.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Like my mom will call me and that's about it. I mean, people will call if it's like, oh, you text first. Do you want to have a phone call?
Yeah,
And that we just accept it, I guess, that that's just the way things are. I happen to really miss phone calls,
I do
and
too.
I don't view phone calls as the one of the addictive elements of our phones.
Yeah.
And we had that before we had smartphones. So that's the reason, that's the one way that I will communicate.
So do you still check Facebook, text, do other things on computers, or are you
Yes,
totally
that's
cleansed
part
from
of
all those things?
yeah. That's part of how I've learned to cope with it. I still use Facebook from my laptop because I'm not on a laptop cleanse, I'm on a phone cleanse.
Okay.
I'm not going to bring my laptop into the car. I'm not going to be walking down the street and be distracted by my laptop. I hope people aren't doing that.
I don't know. I have seen people reading books and shaving while they're driving.
Oh God. Okay.
Like,
Well,
I know.
If anyone's interested though, since we're talking about all this stuff, and I mentioned Casey died because of a truck driver reaching for a phone and iced tea at the same time, I actually do have a chart that was given to me by the National Safety Council that I can give you if you want
Yeah,
to
that
share
would
it
be great.
anywhere.
I can
Because
share it when we
a lot of
post
people
this.
don't know this, but there actually have been studied by several universities all over the country, the varying levels of distraction. So, like, if you're putting on makeup or eating, that's going to be lower than if you're making a phone call. Like, it's different levels.
Right.
And obviously, texting is very, very minimally higher.
And we talk about just things that we do automatically that you
Mhm.
get somewhere you don't even remember driving there,
Yeah,
and the whole thing with people leaving babies in the back of cars.
yeah.
Like, how could you possibly do that? And we are so overwhelmed with so many thoughts and things and doing and
Well, I do use GPS when driving. That was
yeah,
something I had to introduce in year one because I remember I had. This is interesting. I think I said earlier that something about the phone cleanse tied into my book promotion. So, like I said, that agent I had at the time had told me go private on social media. And that summer, I stopped working with him. So I was agent free for like, I don't know, 6 months, I think, or 7 months, something like that. But that was the real crucial time period for me of writing the book because I didn't have anybody telling me how they thought the book should be.
right.
I was free creatively to just make it how I wanted myself. And of course, I finally scheduled my first podcast interview since going private during that phone cleanse. And I got lost and I had to use, because I was going there in person. It was almost like a
Yeah.
radio station kind of thing. So I had to use, I was like, okay, I guess GPS is okay. I don't think GPS is addictive. As long as you have your phone propped up and you're not touching it, then it's okay. I
Well,
mean,
where
your car should be
GPS,
stopped if you're touching it. What?
well, where GPS hurts you, and I always say a smartphone makes us dumb because
Mhm.
it does everything for us. I used
Oh,
to
I
be
know what you're gonna say.
great at directions and
Yeah.
going places. And now when I have GPS, I'll go places and I've gone to some rural areas and it gets you there. And then you get ready to leave. I'm like, I have no idea if I took a left or right coming in here. Like, I
Yeah.
don't pay attention because I don't need to. But before, like I could drive around DC without any problem.
Yeah, what I like to do now, and some of my advocate friends teach this, I think, as well, is I'll look through all of the directions, the whole list on my phone before I go anywhere,
That's smart.
just so at least it's in my brain. But quite honestly, that could be partly due to my phone dying midway through the trip.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is I have an Apple Watch. And if you
Okay.
have like whatever one of the GPS directions when you're driving, it'll buzz on your wrist when you have to turn.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Well, you know what the Apple Watch does too, that's really great. I think there's a thing it does where it knows if you've been in a crash
I
and it
think it
calls
does too.
911. Now,
And I
that's an
know a couple
example of
people have had some
technology.
heart issues and they were having a heart attack and the phone told them or their watch.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's technology helping us.
There are some cool things. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, I really did believe when I first did this, the reason people are still, you know, overusing their phones when they get into cars in ways they don't really need to,
No.
um, is because we're overusing them all the time. And
Right.
it's like the car just feels like I could be sitting in my living room. It's just another space.
Yeah.
Like that's
Like
how we're becoming as a society, like even
I
our
get to
homes
a
now.
light. I'm like, oh, I need to check. I'm like, no, you don't.
Yeah, look at the crazy things people do with technology in public now.
Oh,
Like just watching full movies on a train with the
yeah.
volume all the way up. It's like
Yeah.
there's no
Or
such thing as public space anymore.
yeah. And have you go out to dinner and you watch people that they're all on their phones.
Yeah,
And
it hurts relationships.
yeah, and I've really tried to like, all right, when I'm out and about, like when I'm standing in line, do not pull out my phone. In the elevator, you don't need to you could be present, say hello to somebody, be nice to somebody.
Right.
And I think that's one thing I shared on an episode I did my Why Not Today scavenger hunt. I'm like, be open and aware to who is in your path and who you're supposed to be paying attention to. And when you
Exactly.
have your nose in a phone, you're missing those things. I've told the story a couple times recently. Somebody just reached out to me. I met her 14 years ago. And the only reason I know that is because I could go back on Facebook and that's how we stay connected. We were at a lake and we were coming off the boat and they were there with a couple couples. And we're like, we were just nice. like friendly. We weren't staring at our phone. Like, you want to go on the boat with us? And we spent the next day on the boat with them. And that was the only connection. We connected on Facebook, but really haven't connected. 14 years later, she reached out to me and said that she was turning 60 and wanted to get some Mary Kay products, which anybody listening, if you haven't figured out, I'm also a Mary Kay director. But she said somebody said, "Oh, you should get Mary Kay." And she goes, "I have a Mary Kay person." And she reached out to me 14 years later because I was nice to her and we had made a friendship. And so I think we need to be more aware of when we're in front of people, like not looking at our phones, to have our eyes,
Well,
pay attention, look at people eyeball to eyeball.
yeah, and that was one of the things I really started realizing while doing my project. It was to my benefit to not be on my phone if I was on a train, because I might strike up a conversation with a stranger who's going to help me with a list item.
Yeah.
And it was to my benefit to not have my nose in the phone, because maybe there's some kind of, I started developing almost like this code with my dad. Like I would see hearts every day. I'm not kidding, from like start of 2017, and I still see them now. I just started seeing hearts every day. And when I would see them, I would have this thought of like, I must be on the right track because these are the breadcrumbs that he's leaving me. Would I have noticed it as much if I were on my
No.
phone all the time?
And I feel
No.
like butterflies are mine with my dad.
Yeah. And the thing that really hit home with me, I think, with this idea that we should be more aware. Oh, not should be. I never like to use the word should. It's a good idea to be more aware. Is one of the list items was talk with the president. And I went down to Georgia and I met President Jimmy Carter. And he gave a sermon that day at age 93 that he wrote himself the night before, 45 minutes, memorized, whole thing.
Wow.
Amazing. He did that every Sunday, which he started after his presidency. The crux of the sermon was about a verse in the Bible that dealt with the idea, I think it was Philippians something, I can't remember which one it was, but it dealt with the idea that as we go through life, we're not alone. We're
Yeah.
not, and I don't even just mean, someone who's lost a father or a loved one is guiding us, as Leslie and I have been talking about, but we have guidance, we have a higher being, whatever you believe in. And as I was doing this bucket list, I started noticing when I'm available and I pay attention and I'm receptive, things are showing up that are very helpful. I mean, like, own a black tux that showed up in a boutique right below my apartment. And it was exactly my size. I would have missed it if I was just going out to get coffee and I saw it.
Yeah.
Is right there. So it's like these little things in our real world, our real life are showing up all the time. And anytime I do this phone cleanse, it's like I get a little nervous because I wonder if I'm gonna get disconnected from people, because I will text from my laptop during the cleanse. So it's like if
Right.
you've texted me, I'm not rude, I'll answer, but I'll just say, hey, I'm on a cleanse right now. Can I talk to you later if I'm out and about? But because
Right.
I'm out and about and not on the phone, I just notice things more. It's like I'm just living life. If I see a beautiful flower or like a beautiful sunset, not taking a picture of it.
Yeah.
That's a big one. We take pictures of everything, but are
We're
we
not in the moment.
experiencing it? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And something about eye contact. I was actually watching a Netflix show the other day. It was The Minds of a Dog. And they say, you know how they say puppy dogs have puppy dog eyes? And it's because they're very, I don't know, calculated, but they show the white of their eyes, which is attracting to you and gives you that terms of endearment. And they were talking about with that, with um, babies are the same way. That's how they connect, is through eyes.
Yep.
And unfortunately, a lot of the younger generation, just by default, they're on their phones because that's all they know. And I know a couple people with little ones, and the kids are like, "Mom, put your phone down. Pay attention to me." And they were talking, I don't know if it was that or something else they were talking about, just parents aren't connecting, making that connection. And even if your kid's playing and not paying attention to you, they know when you're paying attention to you and
Yeah.
not. And I
Well,
think
I
this
know
phone
parents who,
thing,
who make rules with that. Like they'll at dinner, after dinner, they put their phone away for the whole night. That's
right.
the rule, which I think
But
is smart.
but the younger generation with these little babies are paying attention to their phone. And we're all these things, all these communications, and the expectation is people need to get back to you right away. I had somebody this weekend email me, and I was out of town and I was trying to kind of check out, and she had asked a question. I'm like, it's a weekend. I don't need to answer this question. And then last night she sent me a text pretty late. She goes, sorry for the late text, but I need the answer thing, which she really didn't need it by then. And so finally I'm like, you know what? I'm exhausted. I do not have time to go. I'm not going to open my laptop and look at this. So I just texted her this morning. I'm like, I've been gone. I will get back to you later today. But
Yeah.
people have this expectation that we need to get back to them immediately, and we don't.
Well, I think one of the reasons I almost feel like I'm a Luddite sometimes compared to a lot of other people. And I think one of the reasons is because of my dad's list. It is because of the project, because it's almost like I missed an era or something like this era where people got really stuck on phones. I was doing The Dreams of a Man from 1978. That's when he wrote the list, when I
Yeah.
was born. And it meant I was busy doing my own thing. And I think there's something to be said for whether you're an artist or it doesn't even have to be necessarily a creative thing. But if you have your own project, like maybe you're a runner, so you're training for a race. So like you have your time and you have to devote your time and energy to the thing that you have shaped in your own life, that you've designed for yourself. There's something about that that makes it so that you don't feel as overwhelmed and required to respond to
Right.
things.
And you have focus and you have direction and you're doing something that's meaningful to you. And I
Yeah.
think we aren't doing those things as much. And because we're distracted, and that's entertainment. And so we need to
Well,
put it away.
that's
And
why you see these short fuses, I think, too, right? Don't
yeah.
people seem to have short fuses more
Oh,
these days?
absolutely. Yeah. And can irritate us really, very quickly because we're
Right.
used to that instant gratification or that constant, like, my ideas come when I'm driving in my car and when I'm in the shower.
Right.
And so, but we're not taking that downtime. We're not taking that creative time. We're not taking that thinking time.
Yeah, I mean, so this year I definitely did feel a little bit more isolation because now I'm having like shower time and car time all the time.
Right.
And on top of it, the pandemic's over, but I still work from home.
Right.
So I'm not getting face to face with coworkers anymore, and my book tour's over. But in the end, that's good. Like it's new habits are painful. And at first they feel very uncomfortable. But if you can sit through the discomfort and understand, I talk to my cousin about this sometimes because she recently became a runner and she's also a therapist. And she's like, pain makes us stronger.
Oh,
If you
absolutely.
can, if you can withstand it with the knowledge that it's building muscles and next time will be easier, like every run gets easier. It's
Yep.
sort of like that. And you can do that with organizing how you use your phone because really it's not in charge of you, you're in charge of it.
Right. And we're letting it be in charge of us. So being strategic with when we could do it. And I think,
Yeah.
it all ties into this overwhelm. We're all overwhelmed. With
And people who are doing their own project in some capacity, they don't have as much FOMO.
right. No, absolutely not. Well, Miss Laura, we could talk forever and ever. And we'll probably have a third version and we'll keep going. But I'm thinking for you next year when you do this, you need to be strategic with planning time to be face to face with people, like schedule ahead of time,
Good
coffees and
point.
lunches. And
Yeah.
we are missing very much. We're so connected and so lonely.
Well, I was with my husband this time, and I think I had a few weekends where I was like away, but I did notice there's a big difference when I'm doing this cleanse and not doing it, as
Right.
far as being aware and making sure he's okay and taking initiative to talk to him. And we talk to
Right.
each other all the time, but I'm
Right.
just saying.
But I think being strategic with, okay, planning things that
Yeah.
you want to be doing or movies or things you're going to do. And like you have encouraged me to, like, I need to put this phone down because it has become an issue and it's a waste of
Yeah.
time. Like,
I
and
mean,
for me, between my two businesses and just life, people communicate with me, obviously on my watch, on my phone, on my laptop. And then I've got two email addresses, two cell phone numbers. I have Instagram, Facebook Messenger, another app people communicate. I mean, there's probably 10 different ways people communicate with me.
yeah,
And
I mean,
I have to check them all because they all check people communicate different ways.
well, I think it also has an effect where it makes you better at what you do when you're not distracted.
Oh, Absolutely. One of
Like,
my mantras in the morning is I work with focus and avoid distractions.
I remember, I just now realized this. Remember how I said last year I was doing the cleanse on my book tour?
Hmm.
I remember that particular 3-week section of book tour better than I remember any of the rest of it.
Isn't that so true?
I was
Well,
so present, that's why,
well,
and probably did a better job.
I've had Mary Kay customers say, they don't wash their face or don't take care of their skin and they need my picture to remind them. I actually had a customer put my picture on her mirror to remind her. And I think I might need to get a picture of you to put on my phone, Laura. You're going to be my screensaver to remind me, like, I don't need to do this. And I literally had
Well,
a friend that we'd be watching TV or doing something, and he'd throw the phone. More than once, he threw my phone across the room. He's like, stop.
yeah, it becomes like a mindless thing. And I
It is
think
a
it's
commercial comes
interesting.
on, or like,
Yeah,
oh,
it's what you said before is very interesting too, because I remember earlier you were talking about your relationship with your phone and you said something about trying to be better. And I thought that was an interesting word choice because anytime you're trying to change a habit and you look at it in terms of good or bad, it affects whether you can change. Like I think
right.
it was, God, I went on this reporter asked me once if I wanted to go on this good skin diet. And it was like you had to eat mostly orange foods and avoid white foods because white foods could make you break out and stuff. I don't
Right.
know if it's the gluten or what it is. And I did it for 3 weeks. And there was something about that particular diet where I was focusing on what I was going to eat as opposed to what I wasn't going to eat.
Which is so much better.
I was a positive choice, right? In
Right.
a positive
Yeah.
direction. And it wasn't like, oh, don't eat that cake. That's bad. I'm bad for eating it. Like
Yeah.
people who view dieting in terms of bad or good, they always say this.
Food
It
and
doesn't
intention.
work because
Right.
you're applying moral judgment to it. And that's the same thing I try to do with my advocacy with the stuff with smartphone addiction. Even with this the idea of having your own bucket list and checking it off, or any kind of creative project you'd like to start, intentional living. I like to talk about what about this is going to be good for me? What about this is going to change my life and make me happier? As opposed to, oh, I better not do that because then I'm bad. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yep. I love that intentional living.
So I
So
think
maybe
about,
I was gonna
sorry.
say maybe instead of your picture on my phone, it should be your dad's picture.
Yeah. Well, what I think about is I know this smartphone cleanse is getting weirder and weirder every year I do it, socially speaking. But I know the benefits I'm getting from it. And I actually look forward to it almost like a summer camp every
Yeah.
year.
And I love it. And I need to live intentionally and not let somebody else rule my world.
Yeah, and a lot of us work from home now, right? So people could try this. You could say maybe just for a week, my phone is only for phone calls and GPS.
Yeah.
And I go back to my house and use my laptop if I need to talk to people,
Mm-hmm.
if I need to text, and just see what happens, see
Gotta
what you
tell my mother
notice.
though, because she'll think I'm dead on the on the floor if she doesn't hear from me. And
Well, just do phone calls or, I
yeah.
mean, I
Oh,
respond to text right away, but it's like, hey, I'm doing this cleanse.
yeah. So, we didn't really talk about what courage means. I know we talked about last time, but what's
Oh,
your
yeah.
definition of courage today?
Um, I think courage for me these days is my insistence on loving my imperfect self.
Hmm, love it.
I know that I am a child of God. I'm a divine being, and I'm also human, so I make mistakes. And I need to love myself if I'm going to be happy in life, if I'm going
Yeah,
to do things that I feel are my purpose and that are, following my bliss, doing what I'm meant to do. That doesn't work if I don't love myself first.
right. Yeah, we have to be brave enough to love ourselves and take care of ourselves.
Yep. Especially, I'm developing this writer career now and I'm still figuring it out. We were talking earlier about overwhelm. That's what I've been going through a little bit, but I'm learning as long as I'm loving myself, it'll figure itself out. It's its own thing.
Everything is figure outable.
Yeah.
And we need to learn how to overcome that overwhelm.
Well, and the last
Everybody
thing I'll
used to say
say,
busy, but now I think everybody's saying overwhelmed.
The last thing I'll say is I think social media contributes to this too because of the comparisons we do all the
Oh,
time with other people. There's a lot of talk of manifesting these days, and there's a lot of talk of like, well, I want to be this, I want to be that. People look at me and they're like, how can I be a published author? How can I be on TV? And it's like, it's not really about that outcome. That's not why I did any of it. It was for the journey, the
right.
experience of connection with my dad, and the experience of now connection with my I guess I'd say vocation, which is writing. The experience of connection with my true authentic self. That's what it's for. It's about doing and following a passion. That's what life is about. It's not about what are other people going to think of me if I have this book in a bookstore.
Right. And it's your journey.
Yeah, it's unique to you.
Yeah, love that. Well, I mentioned in the beginning that one of my passion projects is helping people with overwhelm. And
Yep.
so I am working on a course to help people because I just feel like there's so much out there. And it's why not today lead yourself, your business, and your life with courage. And so part of that is taking care of us, loving ourselves, doing the things that are healthy and help us. But then, being smart with systems, being connected with others, staying focused, all the things we just talked about. And I think a lot of people, we need guidance, we need accountability to be able
Yeah.
to
But
tackle
everything's
those
always
things.
coming from within.
Yep, absolutely. Well, this was awesome, Miss Laura, and I'm sure we'll do another episode and we have to figure out a time to connect and hang out more. Um,
Yeah, I always
New
love
York's not
seeing
that
you.
far away from Virginia.
No, it's
So,
it's really close.
yeah, so I will share all Laura's contact information in the show notes. And of course, her book is My Father's List, which I highly recommend. I've read it a couple times and shared it with lots of people. And and follow Laura in all the places. So, anything you want to say in closing?
Oh, follow your dreams. I actually had planned on starting today's podcast with a quote I read yesterday by Jack Kerouac. It's very short.
Okay.
It's
Well, let's close it with
all human beings are also dream beings. Dreaming ties all mankind together.
so true.
And
And so,
when you're following your dreams, when you're actually going for it and you're saying, why not today? I can start today, as Leslie always says, that's when
yep.
you just
Doesn't
start
have to,
going
and
into
it
a
doesn't have to
whole
be
new
perfect.
flow of life.
Yep. We just need to do it. And I think we went into survival mode the last 4 years and we need to go back
Yeah.
into thriving and dreaming and living our life because we are not promised it tomorrow.
Yeah. And like Joseph Campbell said, a vital person vitalizes.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you for being my guest again. And thank you everybody for enjoying and joining us on this inspiring journey. Remember, every day is an opportunity to take actions, chase your dreams, and make a difference. So why not today? And of course, you can find everything you want to know about the Why Not Today podcast at whynottodaypodcast.com. And we're on all social media. You can share, review the podcast and keep listening. And I'm always looking for inspiring guests. So if you know somebody or you have a courage story, let me know. So thanks again, Miss Laura. And
Oh,
remember,
thank you.
say, why not today?